German high command was certain American supply lines would snap, sealing Patton's fate. They were about to witness a miracle of logistics they couldn't comprehend. August 1944. Deep within a Prussian forest bunker, Wehrmacht strategist General Alfred Jodl scrutinized dispatches from the disintegrating Western Front. His staff officers had crunched the numbers on the Allied advance. General Patton's Third Army had raced nearly 400 miles from the Normandy coast, stretching its supply chain to a threadbare limit. The assessment was unanimous and confident. Patton would stall, perhaps within days. No fighting force could maintain such a blistering pace without fuel. Jodl, from Hitler's Wolf's Lair headquarters, applied conventional military wisdom. A single panzer division gulped 150,000 gallons of petrol every day during an offensive. The Americans were now impossibly far from their depots. The conclusion was inescapable. The Third Army would shudder to a halt, granting the Wehrmacht precious time to solidify defenses at the Seine. What Jodl's intelligence failed to report was that just over 100 miles away, an unstoppable river of trucks was already flowing east. Nearly 6,000 vehicles, their beams piercing the night in a flagrant breach of combat doctrine, were hauling over 12,000 tons of materiel each day. This was the Red Ball Express, a supply effort so bold that German military science dismissed it as fantasy. It was poised to demolish every core assumption about mechanized combat. In just 72 hours, Patton's allegedly stranded tanks would rupture German lines at the Seine. In a week, they would free Paris. In a month, they would reach the German frontier. The finest strategic minds of the Wehrmacht were soon to be schooled in American supply line warfare, a lesson delivered by 23,000 truckers, 3/4 of them black servicemen, who transformed a simple highway into the most effective military supply route ever conceived. The German command's certainty of an American logistical collapse was rooted in their own hard-won experience. They had invented the blitzkrieg, mastered combined arms, and knew all too well the stranglehold of supply constraints. Their own offensives had frequently stalled when logistics failed to match tactical gains. In the vastness of Russia, the Wehrmacht's progress had foundered not first on Soviet defiance, but on the basic impossibility of provisioning forces across enormous distances. Their trucks broke down on rough roads. Horse-drawn carts, which still constituted the bulk of their transport, couldn't keep up with panzer vanguards. Differing railway gauges meant critical supplies accumulated hundreds of miles from the action. General der Panzertruppe Heinrich Freiherr von Leutwitz, who would lead the 47th Panzer Corps, had written in July, "The Americans confront the same logistical nightmare we endured in Russia. Their mechanical edge becomes their weakness. Machines demand constant fuel, ammunition, and parts. They have pushed 400 miles in a month. History shows what followed. Standstill." German intelligence painstakingly monitored American usage rates. A Sherman tank consumed a gallon of fuel every half-mile on roads, and far more off-road. An infantry division required 700 tons of supplies per day. An armored division devoured 1,000 tons. Patton led a dozen divisions advancing across a 60-mile front. The arithmetic appeared unassailable. 12,000 tons daily, hauled 400 miles from the beaches over ruined routes through a transport grid the Germans had meticulously wrecked during their withdrawal. General Major Siegfried Westphal, soon to be Chief of Staff to Field Marshal von Rundstedt, calculated on August 20th that even with infinite trucks, pristine roads, and zero breakdowns, all impossible, the Americans could not maintain Patton's thrust for more than 2 more days. The laws of physics are unbreakable, he noted, even by American industry. On the afternoon of August 25th, 1944, in a commandeered French chateau, Lieutenant Colonel Lauren A., heirs of the Motor Transport Service, confronted a room of doubtful officers. The data they presented was grim. Patton's Third Army was burning through supplies quicker than any force in history, moving at a tempo that shattered all logistical models. Standard supply methods, rail transport, scheduled convoys, depot-to-front distribution had broken down entirely. "Gentlemen," Ayers declared, "we are creating a dedicated highway from Cherbourg and the beaches straight to the front. Every truck will operate 20 hours a day, no stopping except for fuel or breakdowns. We will move a minimum of 12,500 tons every day." The name was borrowed from railroad lingo. A Red Ball shipment was top priority. The Red Ball Express would operate on that same unwavering principle. Absolute priority. Zero delays. The operational plan defied German military textbooks. Two parallel one-way roads, one for loaded trucks heading east, another for empties returning. Round-the-clock operations with headlights on, ditching blackout protocol. A strict no-stop policy. Convoys spaced 5 minutes apart, holding a 35-mile-per-hour average. Mobile repair teams stationed every 50 miles. Military police checkpoints to pull any truck moving below 25 miles per hour. Colonel Charles O. Thrasher, overseeing the advance section, reviewed the projections. We need 140 truck companies, at least 5,958 vehicles, operating at 90% readiness. That's impossible by any logistics manual ever printed. Yet, within a day and a half, the impossible was rolling. On August 26th, drivers from the 3,916th Quartermaster Truck Company climbed into their GMC CCKW 2.5-ton trucks, the famed Deuce and a Half, loaded with 105mm shells, destined for Patton's artillery near Malun, 300 miles east. The racial makeup of the Red Ball Express would have shocked German ideologues. Of the 23,000 drivers who would ultimately run the route, roughly 75% were African-American soldiers serving in a still segregated military. These men, barred from white-owned diners and facilities across much of America, were now the lifeblood of its most celebrated general's campaign. A distinct culture emerged among the drivers almost immediately. They painted names on their trucks: Patton's Lifeline, Berlin or Bust, Detroit's Revenge. They established their own traffic laws. Slower rigs immediately pulled over. Breakdowns were shoved into ditches. Any truck under 20 miles per hour was a roadblock. By August 28th, German scout units started reporting the unprecedented. Units near Alençon radioed from overlooks, continuous vehicle column, headlights visible for 20 kilometers. No spacing, no blackout. Estimate 1,000 vehicles per hour. Americans have discarded all standard military precaution. This contravened every rule German doctrine taught. Headlights at night invited air raids. Tight columns were ideal artillery targets. No spacing meant one disabled truck could halt a whole convoy. Yet the Americans appeared unconcerned. General Lieutenant Edgar Feuchtinger, commanding the 21st Panzer Division, personally watched the Red Ball Express from a hidden position on August 30th. His report to Army Group B headquarters betrayed mounting dread. The enemy runs a supply network beyond our understanding. Vehicles pass at half-minute intervals, day and night, non-stop. They do not conceal, disperse, or follow any rules we recognize. This isn't military science. It is mass production applied to war. What the Germans failed to grasp was that American logistics functioned on entirely different principles. Where German doctrine prized stealth, Americans relied on sheer volume. Where Germans conserved equipment, Americans assumed a 20% failure rate and planned for it. Where Germans adhered to strict procedure, Americans improvised constantly. The figures the Red Ball Express achieved defied German calculations of the logistically feasible. First week, August 25, th. 31 Saint, 1,944, 89,939 tons of supplies delivered. Daily average, 12,848 tons. Round-trip distance, 686 miles. Vehicle rotations, 5,958 trucks, making 1.5 trips each day. Fuel consumed by the operation itself, 300,000 gallons. German logistics experts who later captured these numbers from American records dismissed them as propaganda. But the numbers were real, and they were climbing. By September 5th, the Red Ball Express had established a rhythm that seemed implausible to German supply officers who still depended on horse-drawn carts for most of their transport. Convoys departed every 5 minutes from the western start point. Average convoy size, 67 vehicles. Load per truck, 5 tons standard, often overloaded to 7. Time to cover 350 miles one way, about 14 hours. Turnaround at each end, 2 hours. Vehicles in perpetual motion, 5,000 at any given moment. The Red Ball Express spawned innovations by the hour as drivers and mechanics solved problems German military science viewed as insurmountable. When trucks broke down, roughly 1,800 daily mobile maintenance units fixed them roadside. Mechanics created a triage system, 15 minutes to repair or push it off the road. Parts were scavenged from vehicles deemed beyond repair. Engines were swapped in under an hour using mobile cranes. When the official Red Ball route clogged, drivers forged alternate paths. They requisitioned French buses to move personnel, freeing trucks for cargo. They pressed captured German vehicles into service, painting them olive drab. They built detours around wrecked bridges using rubble from bombed-out structures as foundation. The Germans, watching this chaos that somehow generated perfect order, were baffled. German logistics doctrine stressed meticulous planning, maintenance schedules, and proper protocols. The Americans broke every rule, yet their systems sped up instead of collapsing. The most shocking discovery for German analysts was American fuel handling. The Red Ball Express used 300,000 gallons of gasoline daily just for its own operations, more than many German armies received for all needs. Yet fuel never ran out. The Americans had engineered a parallel wonder, Operation Pluto, laying fuel pipelines across the English Channel. By September 1944, petrol flowed through undersea pipes German intelligence had completely missed. Forward fuel dumps were set up every 25 miles along the Red Ball route. Tanker trucks ran their own parallel convoy system, ensuring no vehicle waited more than 10 minutes to refuel. General Major Walter Warlimont observed from aerial reconnaissance photos, "The Americans have fuel depots larger than our entire strategic reserves. They expend more gasoline moving gasoline than we allot to whole panzer divisions." This is not war as we know it. It is industrial spillover. The Red Ball Express didn't just sustain Patton's advance, it multiplied its velocity exponentially. German military doctrine held that an armored division could manage 20 to 30 miles daily under ideal conditions. Patton's divisions, supplied by the Red Ball, averaged 40 to 60 miles daily for weeks. On September 1st, 1944, the 4th Armored Division advanced 35 miles by noon, paused for resupply, and thanks to waiting Red Ball trucks, pushed another 32 miles that afternoon. This 67-mile single-day advance shattered German defensive plans, which assumed maximum 30-mile daily gains. General Oberst Heinz Guderian, reviewing the reports in East Prussia, initially refused to credit them. No armored force can advance 60 miles daily for a week. Mechanical failures alone forbid it. This is propaganda or misidentification. But intercepted American radio traffic confirmed it. More alarming for German commanders, the Americans broadcast their positions in the clear, without codes, supremely confident they could move faster than the Germans could respond. By September 5, 1944, German intelligence had assembled detailed reports on the Red Ball Express. The ramifications were disastrous for Wehrmacht strategy. Every presumption about American military capacity needed overhaul. The report contained observations that defied German military science. Americans wasted vehicles extravagantly, ditching damaged trucks instead of fixing them. Drivers used stimulants for days, violating all personnel management principles. No camouflage, making the whole system vulnerable to air attack that never materialized. Mechanical failure rates of 30% daily were simply overwhelmed by redundancy. Fuel consumption that would bankrupt any European power. Feldmarschall Walter Model's response revealed his despair. "If these reports are accurate, we face not a superior army but a superior civilization. They make no attempt to hide because they do not fear us. They waste resources because they have limitless resources. We cannot beat this with military tactics." The Red Ball Express drivers paid a physical toll German observers could not see. Drivers operated for 72 hours straight, hallucinating from exhaustion and benzodrine. Accidents killed 300 drivers during the Red Ball's operational period. Trucks collided in fog, overturned on shattered roads, burned when overheated engines caught fire. Yet morale stayed remarkably high. These men, mostly African Americans, denied equal rights at home, knew they were making history. They were disproving Hitler's racial theories, with every mile driven, every ton delivered. Captured German officers gave telling testimony to the Red Ball Express's effect. Oberst Hans von Luck, captured in September 1944, told his interrogators, "We knew we had lost when we grasped your supply system. You break every rule. Waste fuel, discard vehicles, exhaust drivers, yet succeed through pure volume. You have industrialized warfare beyond our understanding." The psychological impact on German troops was crushing. Wehrmacht soldiers could hear American trucks all night, every night, endless engines, endless supplies. They had 3 rounds per rifle while Americans brought millions. The sound itself became a weapon. The trucks themselves impressed German engineers. The GMC CCKW 2.5-ton truck, the backbone of the Red Ball Express, embodied mass production perfection. General Motors had built over 500,000 of these vehicles by war's end, more trucks than the entire German military owned of all types combined. The trucks boasted innovations the Germans had not standardized. All-wheel drive as standard, not optional, automatic tire inflation, waterproofing, allowing 30-inch fording, engines that ran on low-quality fuel, effective heaters. More astonishing was the American maintenance philosophy. Where Germans rebuilt engines, Americans replaced them. Where Germans rationed parts, Americans junked whole vehicles for minor issues. Where Germans had master mechanics, Americans had thousands of competent mechanics who could handle most repairs. As the front shifted east, the Red Ball Express adapted with a speed that stunned German planners used to weeks of preparation for major logistics shifts. When the original route to Chartres became inadequate, Americans created Red Ball extensions overnight: White Ball Express, Rouen to Paris; Green Diamond, Cherbourg to rail transfer points; Red Lion, Bayeux to Brussels; ABC, Antwerp, Brussels, Charleroi. Each new route was operational within 48 hours of conception. German staff officers needed weeks to plan comparable operations. The Americans just painted new markers, assigned trucks, and started moving. The high proportion of African American drivers in the Red Ball Express caused cognitive dissonance for German racial theorists. Nazi ideology proclaimed blacks inferior, incapable of technical tasks, lacking initiative. Yet these men were performing logistics miracles German forces could not match. The African American soldiers understood the irony. They knew what the Nazis thought of them, which made them drive even harder. Every mile they drove refuted Hitler. They were combating racism with ignition keys, defeating Nazi ideology through superior performance. Some German prisoners, forced to load Red Ball trucks as laborers, found their worldview shattered, working alongside African American sergeants who computed weight distributions faster than German engineers, who spoke better English than German English teachers, who treated prisoners decently despite everything Nazi propaganda had claimed about racial behavior. The Red Ball Express required infrastructure Germans thought impossible to create under battle conditions. Engineers built or strengthened 40 bridges, created 15 major fuel dumps, established 26 maintenance stations, and built 8 temporary cities for drivers. All while the operation was running. The bridge at Monte had been blown by German engineers specifically to stop American logistics. The Wehrmacht calculated replacement would take 6 weeks minimum. American engineers threw up a temporary bridge in 14 hours, while Red Ball convoys detoured only 8 miles on hastily bulldozed bypass roads. German engineers watched American construction methods with awe. No planning meetings, no detailed blueprints, just immediate action. They built faster than Germans could destroy, created infrastructure that appeared overnight in French fields. One Red Ball Express feat particularly stunned German artillery officers. Ammunition supply rates that surpassed their highest theoretical estimates. American artillery units fired without restriction, a luxury no German unit had known since 1942. During the reduction of the Metz fortifications in September 1944, the XX Corps artillery fired 100,000 rounds in 24 hours. The Red Ball Express delivered every round plus a 20% surplus. German artillery defending Metz was rationed to 50 rounds per gun daily. The disparity was overwhelming. American guns fired for hours, while German artillery officers reckoned such barrages demanded 50 truckloads of shells per hour. The Red Ball provided it without pause. The Red Ball Express wore out vehicles at rates that would have crippled any other military. By late September, mechanical attrition reached staggering levels. Average vehicle lifespan, 10,000 miles. Normal life, 30,000 miles. Daily breakdown rate, 30% of all vehicles. Engines replaced, 500 weekly. Tires consumed, 10,000 weekly. Total vehicles destroyed or abandoned, over 5,000. Yet the operation never slowed. American production had foreseen such losses. Ships arrived weekly at French ports, carrying hundreds of new trucks. Replacement drivers were trained in 2 days and thrown into convoys. German calculations showed Americans wrecking more trucks weekly than the Wehrmacht possessed in France. Yet their transport capacity grew rather than shrank. They had achieved something Germans thought unattainable: logistics outpacing consumption. French civilians along the Red Ball route witnessed American plenty that contradicted years of German occupation scarcity. The psychological effect on occupied populations was instant and deep. The Red Ball Express drivers, particularly African Americans, often shared their rations with French civilians despite regulations. At every stop, children gathered, and drivers gave them chocolate, cigarettes, soap. The contrast with German occupation was stark. Americans gave away casually what Germans had strictly rationed. German intelligence reported the faced propaganda impact. French civilians now believe American victory inevitable. They cite the truck convoys as proof. Resistance activity has increased 400% along Red Ball routes. The population that accepted our occupation now actively opposes it. In early September 1944, the Red Ball Express faced its sternest test. Patton's Third Army had advanced so far that even the Red Ball strained to maintain supply rates. The round trip now exceeded 700 miles. Drivers were collapsing, vehicles were falling apart. German intelligence detected the stress. General der Panzertruppe Hasso von Manteuffel reported on September 8th. American supply lines show signs of breaking. Convoy intervals have widened from 5 to 15 minutes. Vehicle speed has dropped. This is our chance. But American adaptability again surprised the Germans. Within 72 hours, the Red Ball Express reorganized, created intermediate transfer points, cutting individual runs to 350 miles, implemented driver rotation, set up forward maintenance bases, doubled the number of assigned vehicles. By September 12th, tonnage delivery had actually increased. The crisis that should have stopped Patton only made the system stronger. Supplementing the Red Ball Express, Americans deployed another logistics solution Germans deemed impossible: large-scale aerial supply. C-47 transport planes began delivering critical supplies straight to forward units. Each aircraft carried 3 tons. On September 16, 1944, Wehrmacht observers counted 900 transport flights in one day, delivering 2,700 tons by air. The Luftwaffe at its peak had managed 300 tons daily to Stalingrad, and considered that a maximum effort. The Americans used transport aircraft like trucks, no concern for fighter escort, no fuel limits. They assumed losses and overwhelmed with numbers. The Wehrmacht could not compete with this industrial math. The Red Ball Express operated under command principles that violated German military hierarchy. Junior officers made decisions reserved for generals in the Wehrmacht. Sergeants commanded operations larger than German colonels managed. This decentralization confused German observers. American logistics function without apparent central control. Every lieutenant acts like a general. Every sergeant like a colonel. Chaos should result. Instead, they achieve efficiency. The Wehrmacht could not match it with rigid hierarchy. By October 1944, advancing railheads began to reduce Red Ball Express demands. The operation, meant to last 10 days, had continued for 82 days, delivering 412,000 tons of supplies over 122 million ton-miles. German commanders, now fighting on their own border, reflected on what they had seen. Feldmarschall Model wrote in his final report, "We were not defeated primarily by American tanks or planes. We were defeated by American trucks." The Red Ball Express proved that in modern war, logistics is strategy. The shift to rail transport was itself a marvel. American railroad engineers had rebuilt 1,000 miles of wrecked French rail lines while the Red Ball was running. They laid new track faster than Germans had destroyed it, often using captured German rail equipment. The final Red Ball Express statistics defied every German calculation of logistical possibility. 82 days of operation. 412,193 tons of supplies delivered. 222 million ton-miles. 5,958 vehicles average. 7,000 peak. 23,000 total drivers employed. 700,000 gallons of fuel consumed daily. 40,000 tons of ammunition delivered to Patton alone. 15 million rations transported. 135,000 medical supply tons. Reviewing these figures in captivity, German officers admitted they had computed American logistics based on European precedent. They had multiplied their best performance by 3 and assumed that was the American maximum. They were wrong by a factor of 10. Beyond tonnage and distance, the Red Ball Express accomplished something more profound. It destroyed German faith in their own military supremacy. Wehrmacht officers, who had dismissed Americans as soft and mechanically reliant, watched those same Americans achieve logistics miracles through grit and industrial abundance. German POWs would stand silent at prison camp fences, counting passing red ball trucks. Some wept. They understood what it meant. Not just that Americans could supply their armies, but that they could waste more than Germans could produce. They were watching their worldview disintegrate, one truck at a time. The Red Ball Express forced an unexpected racial reckoning within the American military itself. The operation's success leaned overwhelmingly on African American soldiers who were still segregated, denied equal treatment, and barred from combat roles. General Eisenhower, visiting Red Ball operations in September 1944, saw the contradiction firsthand. His aide, Captain Harry Butcher, recorded, "The general stood, watching colored drivers who'd been at it for 20 hours straight. He said, 'These men are winning the war as surely as any infantry. We need to rethink many things.'" The success generated pressure for integration that contributed to military desegregation 3 years later. African American soldiers had proved in France what they always knew. Given the tools and opportunity, they would equal anyone. The Red Ball was their battlefield, and they won it decisively. German racial theorists struggled to explain the contradiction. SS racial science publications simply stopped mentioning American logistics operations. The evidence was too overwhelming to deny, too damaging to acknowledge. German military engineers studied Red Ball Express operations intensely after the war. The lessons transformed global logistics thinking. Volume overcomes inefficiency. Mechanical redundancy eliminates vulnerability. Decentralized execution enables speed. Standardization multiplies capability. Human endurance has limits, but they are higher than assumed. General Franz Halder, former chief of the German General Staff, wrote in 1950, "The Red Ball Express proved logistics determined strategy, not the reverse. Americans understood this. We learned it too late." Among the 23,000 Red Ball drivers, individual tales of heroism emerged that Germans found incomprehensible within their military framework. These were verified accounts from military records. Corporal John L. Houston drove nonstop for 48 hours, delivering ammunition to the 2nd Armored Division at Cambrai, falling asleep at the wheel 3 times, but continuing after other drivers revived him. Private Booker T. Washington's truck caught fire from overheated brakes while carrying medical supplies. Instead of abandoning it as procedure dictated, he drove the burning vehicle 2 miles to a field hospital, leaping out as flames reached the cab. The supplies saved wounded soldiers from both armies. These stories, multiplied thousands of times, revealed American military culture to observing Germans. Individual initiative, calculated risk-taking, and mission accomplishment over regulatory compliance. Desperately, German forces tried to create their own version of the Red Ball Express in late 1944. Operation Greif, during the Battle of the Bulge, included plans to use captured American trucks to form German supply lines. The effort failed immediately. German drivers couldn't maintain American speeds. German mechanics couldn't repair American equipment fast enough. German fuel supplies couldn't sustain the consumption rates. Most fundamentally, Germans couldn't replicate the American attitude of unlimited resources. Oberst von der Heide, commanding the operation, reported, "We captured 50 American trucks. Within a week, 30 were deadlined. Americans would have replaced them. We tried to repair them." That difference explains our defeat. The winter of 1944-45 delivered the Red Ball Express's ultimate trial. Freezing rain, snow, and ice should have halted wheeled transport. German doctrine stated wheeled logistics became impossible below -10 degrees Celsius, yet the Red Ball Express continued. Drivers wrapped chains on tires, poured alcohol in radiators, and kept rolling. Speeds dropped from 35 to 15 mph, but tonnage delivery continued. German observers reported ice-coated convoys moving through blizzards that had stopped panzer divisions. The Americans had created a logistics system that functioned regardless of weather, terrain, or enemy action. It wasn't elegant or efficient by German standards, but it was unstoppable. In May 1945, captured German logistics officers were made to study Red Ball Express operations for historical records. Their conclusions were unanimous and devastating to German military pride. General der Infanterie Friedrich Schulz summarized, "The Red Ball Express represents warfare we never envisioned. Americans created a temporary, Civilization. Thousands of men, thousands of vehicles, millions of tons of supplies that existed only to feed armies, then dissolved when no longer needed. We built permanent infrastructure over years. They created superior temporary systems in days. The most insightful analysis came from General Loberst Heinz Guderian, father of German armored warfare. We invented blitzkrieg, but never solved its fundamental limitation, logistics. Americans solved it through industrial excess we deemed impossible. The Red Ball Express was not a supply line, but a flowing river of material that drowned our forces. The Red Ball Express cost the United States approximately $100 million in 1944 vehicles destroyed, fuel consumed, roads ruined, French damage claims. German staff officers, accustomed to managing scarcity, found the figure unbelievable. Yet, Americans considered it cheap. The operation enabled the capture of 400,000 German soldiers, the liberation of France, Belgium, and Luxembourg, and shortened the war by an estimated 6 months. Each day of war cost America $250 million. The Red Ball Express paid for itself in a single day of shortened conflict. Lieutenant General John C. H. Lee, commanding logistics for the European theater, stated, "We wore out 5,000 trucks and 23,000 men to destroy the German army in France." In any previous war, that would be catastrophic losses. In American industrial war, it's acceptable overhead. An unexpected consequence of the Red Ball Express was the revolutionary impact on post-war civilian logistics. Thousands of drivers returned to America with experience running the world's largest transportation network. These veterans founded trucking companies, designed interstate highways, and created the modern American logistics industry. Firms like Yellow Freight, Roadway, and Consolidated Freightways were started by Red Ball veterans who applied military logistics to civilian commerce. They had learned in France that volume beats efficiency, speed beats perfection, and if you can keep trucks rolling 24 hours, you can move the world. Military historians universally recognize the Red Ball Express as the decisive logistics operation of the European theater. Without it, Patton's advance stops, Paris falls weeks later, and German forces successfully establish winter defensive lines. The operation validated American military doctrine that emphasized logistics over tactics. While German officers studied Clausewitz and battlefield maneuver, Americans studied Detroit assembly lines and railroad timetables. The Red Ball Express demonstrated that in modern warfare, the ability to supply forces determines victory more than tactical brilliance. On September 15, 1944, Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, Supreme German Commander in the West, received comprehensive intelligence on the Red Ball Express. After studying the reports for hours, he summoned his staff. "Gentlemen," he announced, "we face something beyond military solution. The Americans have created a supply system that makes distance irrelevant. Our strategy assumed their culminating point where advancing forces outrun supplies. That point doesn't exist. They have revolutionized warfare, and we are fighting the last war." His operations officer, Oberst Hans Speidel, suggested interdicting the Red Ball routes with the remaining Luftwaffe. Von Rundstedt's response revealed complete understanding. "With what shall we interdict? They have 6,000 trucks. If we destroy 1,000, which we cannot, they'll replace them in a week. We'd need to destroy 200 trucks daily just to match their production. We don't have 200 aircraft total." Behind the statistics were human stories that revealed American character to German observers. Drivers who hadn't slept for 3 days refusing relief because their trucks might not make it through. Mechanics working in freezing rain to keep convoys rolling. Teenagers lying about their age to drive trucks. Such stories multiplied throughout the operation created a mythology that demoralized German forces. The Americans were not soft as propaganda claimed. They drove themselves harder than Germans drove horses, but they did it voluntarily, not from fear. This made them more dangerous than German doctrine had understood. The Red Ball Express became unintentional propaganda more powerful than any planned operation. German soldiers could hear the convoys at night, endless streams of motors that never stopped. The sound itself became psychological warfare. German units reported hearing ghost convoys that demoralized troops as effectively as actual logistics. The knowledge that Americans had unlimited supplies, while Germans rationed their last ammunition, created despair that undermined combat effectiveness. American psychological warfare units recognized the impact They began broadcasting truck engine sounds toward German lines when actual convoys weren't present. German units reported these phantom convoys as real, demonstrating the psychological damage the Red Ball Express had inflicted. In November 1944, with rail lines partially restored, the Red Ball Express was officially discontinued. But its methods had revolutionized military logistics permanently. The concept of continuous, high-volume, wasteful but effective supply became American military doctrine. The final innovation was the speed of dissolution. The massive operation, 23,000 men, 6,000 vehicles, hundreds of installations vanished in 72 hours. Troops reassigned, vehicles redistributed, routes returned to civilian use. Germans required months to create smaller operations and years to dissolve them. Americans built what they needed, used it, discarded it, and built something better. When German generals surrendered in May 1945, many cited the Red Ball Express, specifically as demonstrating the hopelessness of continued resistance. General der Panzertruppe Hasso von Manteuffel stated at interrogation, "When we understood your logistics capacity, we knew the war was lost. You could supply armies faster than we could destroy them." The Red Ball Express was a weapon against which we had no defense. Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, among Germany's most competent commanders, was asked what most surprised him about American forces. His answer, "Not your tanks, not your planes, but your trucks. The Red Ball Express showed us that you had militarized your entire society's production capacity. We were fighting your factories, not just your soldiers." The final statistics of the Red Ball Express stand as testament to American industrial warfare. Total cargo delivered, 412,193 tons. Total distance covered, 122 million ton-miles. Trucks employed, 5,958 daily average, 7,000 peak. Drivers involved, 23,000 total. Operating days, 82. Fuel consumed, 57 million gallons. Tires worn out, 180,000. Vehicles destroyed, 5,000 plus. Cost, $100 million. German divisions defeated, through supply advantage, 47. Estimated war days shortened, 180. These numbers tell a story that transcended military operations. They represent the moment when warfare changed forever, when industrial capacity became more important than tactical brilliance, when logistics determined strategy rather than serving it. In 1994, on the 50th anniversary of D-Day, the United States Postal Service issued a commemorative stamp honoring the Red Ball Express. The ceremony recognized the operation that had been overshadowed by combat operations, but proved equally decisive in Allied victory. Veterans who attended spoke of their pride in an operation that proved American industrial might and individual determination could overcome any obstacle. They had driven through exhaustion, through mechanical failure, through weather that stopped armor. They were black soldiers mostly, segregated, discriminated against, denied recognition during the war, but they had delivered victory at 35 miles per hour. The Red Ball Express proved that in modern warfare, logistics is not support. It is the main effort. The operation demonstrated that industrial democracy could mobilize resources on a scale that totalitarian efficiency couldn't match. German generals who had laughed at American logistics were silenced by 6,000 trucks, delivering 12,500 tons daily across 700 miles of liberated France. They had assumed Americans would follow European precedent, conserve resources, advance cautiously. Instead, Americans created a logistics tsunami that drowned German forces in Allied abundance. The operation's success came not from military genius, but from American characteristics Germans never understood: industrial excess, mechanical aptitude, improvisational skill, and most importantly, the initiative of individual soldiers who made independent decisions that in the Wehrmacht would require field marshal approval. In his memoirs, General George S. Patton, whose Third Army was the primary beneficiary of the Red Ball Express, wrote the ultimate tribute. The truck drivers of the Red Ball Express deserved as much credit for the defeat of Germany as any combat unit. They drove through exhaustion, through mechanical failure, through weather that stopped armor. Without them, the Third Army doesn't move. Without movement, we don't win. They were black soldiers, mostly, segregated, discriminated against, denied recognition. But they won the war as surely as any rifleman. History must record this truth. That truth stands as the final testament to the Red Ball Express. 23,000 mostly African-American drivers, operating 6,000 trucks on a one-way highway to victory, achieved what German military science declared impossible. They supplied advancing armies faster than physics should allow, maintained tempo beyond human endurance, and proved that in modern warfare, the side with the most trucks beats the side with the best tactics. The German generals had laughed at American logistics, dismissing it as wasteful, undisciplined, impossible to sustain. 82 days later, those same generals surrendered to armies supplied by the Red Ball Express, finally understanding that American trucks had defeated German tanks, that industrial abundance had overwhelmed military excellence, that logistics had become strategy. The Red Ball Express ended on November 16, 1944, but its impact echoed through military history. It proved that in the industrial age, victory belongs not to the bravest soldiers or brightest generals, but to the nation that can deliver the most supplies, the fastest, the farthest. The German generals who laughed at American logistics in August 1944 signed surrender documents in May 1945, defeated by 23,000 truck drivers who revolutionized warfare at 35 miles per hour. Their story deserves its place among the great military operations of history. Not because it was elegant or efficient, it was neither, but because it worked. The Red Ball Express kept Patton rolling, kept the Germans retreating, and proved that in modern war, the convoy of trucks matters more than the column of tanks. The highways of France still bear the scars of the Red Ball Express. Ruts worn by overloaded trucks, bridges hastily repaired, roadsides littered with abandoned vehicles. But the greatest monument to the operation is the speed of Allied victory. Every day, the war shortened, saved thousands of lives. The Red Ball Express shortened it by months. In the end, the German generals who laughed at American logistics learned the hardest lesson of modern warfare. Amateurs talk tactics, professionals talk logistics, and Americans talk trucks. The Red Ball Express was America talking very loudly indeed in the roar of 6,000 engines that never stopped, carrying democracy and destruction at 35 miles per hour down a one-way road to victory. The last word belongs to a German officer whose name is lost to history, quoted by a Red Ball driver at the 1994 commemoration. Standing beside a road in Belgium, watching the endless convoy of American trucks, the officer said in accented English to his captors, "We prepared for everything. Your tanks, your planes, your ships. We never prepared for your trucks. How do you defeat an enemy who has more trucks than you have soldiers?" The answer rolled past him at 5-minute intervals, driven by exhausted Americans who were rewriting the rules of warfare, one delivery at a time. The Red Ball Express had made logistics into strategy, supply into victory, and trucks into the most decisive weapon of the European war. The German generals stopped laughing when they understood this truth, but by then, Patton was already at their gates, supplied by the greatest logistics operation in military history. They were defeated not by tanks, but by trucks. If you appreciate this deep dive into the unsung heroes who won the war of supply, please like this video and follow Winds of Thought for more untold stories of history.